Right, afternoon everyone. So I get the enviable task of trying to wake everybody up after lunch. I also managed to eat the beef pie without getting anything on my chest, so I'm quite pleased with that. Thanks for the intro. My name's Tom. I head up AI adoption at Kainos. And I've spent the last sort of 15 years building, training machine learning models, back when it was called machine learning and maths before it became AI. And I wanted to kind of use this session to give you some practical tools to take away to help move people through from proof of concepts into production. So I'll stick on to my next slide. Briefly then, I want to kind of set the scene a little bit. A bit of context around what we're seeing in the AI landscape, and then look at how we shift from proof of concept purgatory into POC paradise. I had to go with all things that rhyme and have the same starting letter, so you'll see that as a theme throughout. We're then going to look at a piece of work that I've done at Kainos, our AI framework, and I think it's kind of encapsulating some of the thinking to how we can help you move through into production. I want to do a bit of a deep dive into some of those kind of common themes that we're seeing from customers and how I think that will help. And then I want to kind of follow up with just a few kind of key takeaways at the end that you can take with you and use as you build out your kind of AI journey. I've just realized I didn't mean to update the timing on one of these slides, so this animation will not work. I had it brilliantly timed so that as I worked through, different things would kind of appear, but I think the timing might be slightly off, so we'll see how we go. I've just wanted to sort of chart the growth in AI capability over the last couple of years, and a few people have referenced it earlier. But 2022, it was only 3 years ago that ChatGPT came out, and that was really the kind of catalyst behind AI adoption across the mainstream. It was the point at which AI became known to everyone. Now, I remember back in sort of 2018, 2019, when BERT first came out. Hands up, anyone use BERT, distill BERT? Yeah, there's a few people in the room who've built some stuff. Right, that was exciting, but only for me and those 3 guys over there. Nobody else had heard of it. Now, these tools are in everybody's pockets, being used by everyone, and that's been a massive shift. We've seen RAG come over as the kind of default way to bring context into models. We've had Microsoft releasing things like Copilot and Bing Chat Enterprise to really bring AI into the workplace and into tools. I think Ruth mentioned it earlier, but things like having AI embedded in Outlook, in Word, in Excel has massively shifted the uptake. We've had text-to-image models become really, really powerful. Will Smith can now almost eat spaghetti properly. I was trying to do, Sora 2 got released yesterday, and I thought I'd try and see what like a physics-enabled spaghetti eating would look like, but I couldn't get it to run fast enough to get out into this presentation today. Notebook LM, absolutely fantastic tool for creating podcasts, so you can listen to documents that are too long to read. And as I knew it would get stuck now. So I had 2 seconds, but one of them now takes like 50 something. 2025 came along, and we thought we'd sort of cracked it. Things were getting slightly better, but it was incremental gains, and it felt like we were starting to see a kind of reusable pattern for developing AI solutions. We were using RAG, we were using kind of guardrails to manage those systems, and they were working reasonably well. And then we had agents appear on the scene, and agentic AI, which then really kind of threw all of that out the window. We've now seen kind of computer use agents as well that are able to take actions on our behalf. And that, I'm just going to skip ahead. There we go. That's what you would have got to. I think our job as innovators, as users of AI, as deployers of systems, have got to try and stay on top of all of this. And I mean, this picture, I probably could have put up, 3-4 times as many models as this. The point is that it's really complicated and that it's changing really rapidly. And it's our job to try and keep on top of all of that, and that's almost impossible. So what I want to try to pitch today is that rather than focus on the technology, we focus on the value we're trying to achieve, we focus on the problem we're trying to solve, and then we pick the appropriate technology to address that challenge. So 2023, we saw lots of people doing sandboxes, doing hackathons, pilots, and really it was kind of a tech-first conversation. It was, here's this new thing, what can it do, how could we use it? And the focus really was on those kind of wow factors, not on any value. 2024, as I say, starting to explore things like RAG and guardrails and internal rollouts for other tools. And then as we move into 2025, I think this is the point at which we now need to start seeing some return on that investment. AI needs to start living up to the promise and delivering what we all thought it would. So that's things like having propagated rollouts, procurements that support and enable AI at scale, and also the appropriate risk management in place to make sure that it works properly. So I'll start with what I've deemed POC purgatory, which I think is where quite a few people seem to end up. Just to check who's awake, I was going to do a little tiny bit of audience participation. So can we just do hands up, anyone that has run a proof of concept into an AI product in the last 12 months? And then keep your hands up if that thing has made it into production and is now being used by your organization. There's a few wavering. That's pretty good. I think that's better than I was expecting. Maybe like a third have made it through to something that's still being used. But we've got to start somewhere. And why is it why is it most people aren't able to do that, right? So 3 things, I think. First, we're focusing on building something cool. And that works for technology and technologists, but it doesn't work for a business. We need to understand who we're building it for and why. Success, again, as I said, is judged by the shiny things, not by any real value. And actually, we're forgetting the user and the reason why we're doing these things. And then the worst thing, which I see happen all the time, is when you build a demo and people think that's good to go, and they just deploy the thing, and then that's it live in the organization. But there's no thinking around how this would actually work at any real scale, right? So what does better look like? Starting, as I said, with the user. What is it we're trying to build, for who and why? And how's it going to work? What would success look like if this were to be used by everyone? Evaluations, super important. How do you know if something works if you're not benchmarking it and testing it? And then also, we're talking about proof of concept, so we're still at that early stage, but having a view to where you think it's going to go, how it's going to scale in the future is really important. So if something works for 10 people, is it still going to work for 10,000? So making sure that you're asking the right questions at each stage, I think, is really important. So that's why we put together this AI framework. This is a piece of work that I think is really important and kind of timely. And it's something that we at Kainos did a couple of years ago, back in sort of 2023. But we've reiterated it every year as new content comes out. So this is the kind of 2025 version. And it's based on our experience of having delivered these sorts of data and AI projects across UK government, healthcare, commercial sector customers. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes kind of talking through some of the key points. So you'll see it's made up of 4 stages: discovery, design, develop, deploy. I said I like alliteration, so there's a lot of that. Really critical, though, and I think this is a really unique and positive thing about AICon, is there's a real focus on responsible AI and having a bit of challenge to the tech in the room. I think that's a really healthy thing to do. So having that responsible AI foundation in the middle. And we've also got, I was in one of the other sessions earlier, they talked about the rise of an AI ops lead as an important kind of role to enable delivery. So I think that AI ops piece is super important. But so starting in discovery, this is, I think, the most important, and it's the place where we go wrong most often. So it's critical to understand, what is it we're building, for who, and what would success look like for them. Then looking at data. No AI solution is going to work without appropriate data. So asking the question of, do we have data, is the wrong one, because we've all got loads of data. It's just all rubbish and not particularly useful. So the correct question we should be thinking is, have we got clean, usable data? Is it governed? Do we understand who owns it and what we can use it for? Do we understand what it's telling us? Is it in the right place? Is it accessible to join up to the model? Thinking about security. Where are we going to host this solution? Issues around kind of data sovereignty and AI sovereignty, ethics and compliance with local laws. And I think a really helpful place to start is thinking about EU AI Act risk tiers. So where does your solution fit? Is it kind of high, medium, or low risk? And that will help you understand what kind of proportionate governance looks like around that solution. Design. This is where we start to form some shape around our ideas, and we can test some of the unknown. So it's not about building the whole thing, but it is about understanding the key kind of problematic points and de-risking those for future development. You might want to think about, in the evaluation, things like if you're doing a RAG system, like how well does the retrieval work? Because that's the process by which your AI model is going to learn context of your business. So how well is it doing that? Looking at evaluating different prompts or perhaps orchestration approaches if you're using something agentic. Security, again, common theme comes up under lots of these. Things like guardrails, prompt redactions, structuring your output to make sure you get a consistent approach from a non-deterministic system. And also refusal handling, so making sure your model is able to say no if it doesn't know the answer. Model selection, quite important. Not just around kind of performance, but also things like latency, cost, bias, and increasingly as well environmental concerns around how much carbon emissions are there around serving inference from a particular model. And then also thinking about open source versus proprietary models and the kind of payoff there. And again, I think it's really important at this stage to still plan for that deployment. Think about how would you integrate and support the solution once it does go live, because hopefully that's where we're going to get to, right? And thirdly, developing. So this is where we move from exploration and into engineering, and the focus shifts from speed to rigor. We're looking at things like model controls. So how do we validate what the model is doing? How do we ensure that it's doing it safely? And how are we logging all of the things that it's doing? That feeds into that evaluation. So it's not good enough that a model performs a task. We've all seen demos of, can you get this model to do this thing? And generally, yes, it will probably do it. But will it do it reliably? Will it do the same thing every time consistently in a way that you're able to rely on and that you could turn off the human alternative in that process? Potentially not. Thinking about hallucination rates, what does latency look like under load? How much is it going to cost? How fair is it? Things like red teaming and evaluation harnesses are really useful here to kind of build that credibility. Think about explainability as a key deliverable of the project. How are you going to understand what this model is doing? So for RAG solutions, things like sourcing and citations are really useful. But for more complicated kind of agentic solutions, think about things like decision traces, transparency packs, model cards, stuff like that. And logging is obviously kind of super critical. And it's about how you kind of operationalize that fairness, particularly in a high-risk system. So deployment, I think we can kind of see this as the end, and I should probably have put like a circle in the middle or something to show that this is a kind of ongoing iterative process. But deployment is just the transition from you building a thing to you running a thing. And actually, I think the focus there should more shift towards things like people change, enablement, support. So how are your teams going to support the system when it goes live? How are your ops teams going to escalate if something goes wrong? How are we going to monitor the usage, the cost, the performance of that solution? If you've got a RAG or a knowledge base sat behind it, how do you make sure that stays fresh and still represents your business today? Things will change over time. As I put in my kind of earlier slide, right, there's been massive shift in technology. So building a solution which is really fragile and based on a single tech stack is not a good way to go. You need to have something that is flexible, that you can optimize and evolve and change different components, swap different models out. So having that kind of modular architecture is super important. And as I mentioned earlier, the responsible AI element, and that's not a kind of afterthought. That should be a core principle of everything you're building. It's that foundation that sits across the kind of end-to-end life cycle. So, as I said, kind of starting early, trying to clarify the intent of what it is you're building this solution to do. How does it align with your organizational values? Having diverse input of thought to make sure that what you're building meets everyone's expectations. In the design phase, think about documentation. So I know we've got some kind of governance people in the room as well, thinking about things like data protection, impact assessments, algorithmic impact assessments. They're not necessarily a blocker to doing things, but they are really important to get them because they'll help you think about some things you might not have considered. Assess your risk proportionately. And then as we move into development, thinking about testing with different groups and seeing how well this solution performs. As you move into deployment, I think, again, things like guidance and support and an understanding of how, what the mechanism for redress looks like. So if this doesn't work, what's the route back in there. And I think critically, this is all about trust. This is about generating trust in your users, that they understand how the system works. It's about generating trust from the organization, that they're able to turn it on and rely on this system. And also about things like kind of regulators and legislators, making sure you're able to demonstrate there. So responsible AI is about giving you that kind of justified, safe systems that are aligned with our human values. And then the final section, AI ops. So I think this could say kind of ML ops or agent ops or insert ops here. Think of AI ops as the process by which you can make an operationally robust system. It's the DevSecOps of AI. And I think there's three kind of core things here, right? It's about reproducibility, so version controlling everything, your data, your prompts, your evaluations, making sure you can consistently bring those back in. It's about automation, automating testing, automating training, automating deployment pipelines so you can rapidly iterate and develop. And it's about observability. How is your system performing and what is it costing? And I think AI ops matters more and more as our systems get more and more complicated. So in an agentic world, making sure you understand how that system is working is absolutely critical. So I was just going to show you kind of what that looks like. I picked an example that the structure is the same, right? So this is the first section of the design principle around defining your initial architecture. And so for each of the sections in the framework, you'll find a list of roles of people that we think should be involved. Now, actually, this is just a suggestion. Depending on the solution you're building, be proportionate to who you need in the room. We don't need to make massive teams to do everything. And often people wear multiple hats. I think the key point, though, is that you need to have a diversity of thought, and you need to make sure you've got a good mix of tech and non-tech in the room to help you design that solution. The second thing is some context. So for each section, we outline why we think it's important, what's the background behind this, and why you need to be considering that element of the framework. And then finally, we have some activities, stuff you need to do. So think of this as effectively a checklist of activities. And I've differentiated them between must-do things and should-do things. I tried to do the full kind of Moscow, but there isn't really anything you shouldn't do. Must-do are really critical. So for every solution, it's really important that you consider all of these things. And I said, be proportionate and pragmatic about how you apply that. You don't necessarily need to do a huge amount of work under all of these, but I think that it's useful as a prompt, as a consideration to make sure you're thinking about all the right things. And the should-dos are really powerful. They still have huge value. And if you've got the capability to do them, then again, you should. And then finally, we've also got some artifacts. So deliverables, documents. It could be code, or it could be a document. But these are things which you should or will end up with as a result of having worked through that framework. And these kind of artifacts you can then pass through and give you that kind of grounding for transparency and auditing purposes. So you've got all of that key information captured into a couple of kind of key documents. So I think that's really important. So just to kind of wrap up, I think really critical, and I'm sure there are a number of other people today who have kind of given the same sort of message. Tech exploration is cool, and technologists enjoy it, and it has a place. But if we're building something for a business, we should be doing it for a reason, and we should be starting with that reason and then bringing the technology in to solve it, rather than the other way around. Proof of concepts are really useful as an accelerator. They are a way of understanding what you're trying to build, building something that you can put in front of people often to get a business case approved or to show what it might be able to do, but they're just one step. They're not the end point. We shouldn't be ending at a proof of concept. As I kind of set out in the first slide, technology is ever-changing. There's a huge number of different things going on here, and if you try and keep on top of all of those things and always be chasing that latest innovation, you're just going to come unstuck. So I think it's really critical to take a value-based approach, and then that way the technology doesn't matter. The technology is just the way in which you achieve something. But by starting with that value, you'll be much more successful. The AI framework I showed you earlier, I'll put a QR code up in a second, and you can use that to download a copy, go and have a look. Obviously, I'd like it if you choose to use Kainos to help you work through some of those things, but feel free to use other providers if you want to. The key thing is there's loads of really cool use cases and really thorny problems that AI can help with, and it's just, we have an opportunity to deliver some of those things. So if this helps you, then great, please use it. And as I say, let's go on and deliver some really cool AI to solve some of these tricky challenges. So I've just put on there, there's a QR code, you can enjoy my headshot over there, and if you want to download a copy of the framework, that QR code will take you there.